You guys absolutely loved Rook and our breakdown of the first Rook Exodus issue, but I'm here to tell you right here and right now that if you thought the first issue was good, then you have absolutely no idea what's in store and how peak this story really is. And yes, this video is going to be longer than 90% of the TikToks you see today, so if your brain rot can't survive anything more than Hawk Tuah and Rizzler, scroll up, you lost the challenge. So we start off in the same woods we left off on. The woods where Swine and his pack of hogs were ruthlessly torn to shreds by Ersa, the man who controls the bears, and as Dire Wolf, the warden of the wolves and good friend of Swine's, investigates the slaughter, she makes the unfortunate discovery that Swine was dead as well after coming across his body. So she orders one of her wolves to share its determination and drive, expressing that she needed the pack's animal instinct to flow through her so she could find our one and only main character, Rook. And speaking of our main character, the story then brings us to a body of water where Rook was hesitating to scavenge through an underwater crash site because his helmet's signal was weaker in water. And while in the midst of contemplating his decision, he expressed that he hadn't heard from Swine since yesterday, since finding out that his camp was on fire and many of his pigs had been slaughtered. Nevertheless, he was hopeful Swine was still alive and stayed up all night waiting for his friend to reconnect to the neural network / wildlife grid. But instead he got a reading on another crash site, and what made him even more unsure of jumping in the water was the fear of missing Swine's call if he eventually tried contacting him. Soon enough, that decision was made for him though, when a beyond enormous snapping turtle came shooting up from underneath him, immediately snapping his boat in half and swallowing a portion of his birds. So without hesitation, Rook began swimming underwater as fast as he possibly could have, and in the middle of the process, he began explaining that the warden's helmets came with a side effect referred to as instinct influence, that was sometimes beneficial and sometimes not, because when instinct influence took place, the warden starts to think and feel like the species they were connected to. And so as a result of the birds not feeling any remorse that a bunch of their fellow birds had just been eaten, Rook had to fight the feeling of overwhelming selfishness and remember to grab the part he was looking for and get out of there as quickly as possible, because there was still a chance of Swine calling him for help. After making it to shore, the snapping turtle emerged from the body of water once again, trailing Rook a lot closer than he wanted. So in an act of desperation and quick thinking, Rook clicked a button on his wrist, immediately triggering his vehicle to kill the turtle by hurling itself at full speed directly into its head. Now this basically killed two birds with one stone, because not only did it allow him to escape with the part he needed, but it also gave the birds something to fill their appetites. As we move forward, the story goes back over to New Mason, where Rook tirelessly worked all day to finish building his rocket. But despite such a big accomplishment, he expressed that he wasn't feeling any emotions because his friend Swine wasn't there, and because the birds were suppressing his humanity the same way they did with the turtle. So he removed his helmet in hopes of getting rid of the instinct influence, but because that proved completely ineffective, he started drinking extensive amounts of alcohol while questioning whether it was worth it to continue waiting for Swine. After reaching his limit, he started passing out in the chair he was sitting in, only to be interrupted just a few moments later by his former love interest, Dire Wolf. Because he didn't realize who she was at first, he pulled out his hand cannon on her, but after regaining his senses, he put his weapon down, and Donica asked him where his helmet was. Underwhelmed with the question because he thought that that was all she was there for, Rook then asked why her and her father were still trying to save this world, because it definitely couldn't be saved. And that's when Dire Wolf revealed the actual reason she was there, informing him that Swine was dead now. Struck by emotion, Rook would then put his head down while stating that he was so close to getting him off this planet alive. Soon enough, Donica started asking him about his rocket, and so after taking her to it, Rook expressed that Swine and his pigs were responsible for sniffing out most of the parts, and that it was finally finished, which meant that he was leaving tonight now that Swine was gone, and he wanted Donica to go with him. But you see, the reason Rook and Donica's relationship failed to last was because it was against company rules and she was a company woman. So much so that she still believed Exodus was worth fighting for, claiming that Better World was coming to make things right by fixing the world engine. Rook's belief stayed the same though, stressing that nobody was coming back for them and that their recklessness resulted in the death of Hog, so he didn't care for Better World's world anymore. After that, he indicated that his rocket could be their second chance and their only chance. But in the midst of doing so, both of them were caught by surprise when a massive explosion in the city erupted. That's when Dire Wolf expressed that he was here, and upon asking her who, Donica stated the man who murdered our friend, as Ersa and his massive weaponized vehicle, accompanied by his wild pack of bears, came gunning directly towards them. Using his helmet to establish his connection to the wildlife grid, Ersa then commanded his merciless beasts to kill them, and immediately upon doing so, they started blasting in Rook and Donika's direction with the turrets latched onto their backs. Nevertheless, because Donika believed it wasn't the bears' fault, she instructed Rook not to use lethal force and then used her weapon to strike two of them with darts, causing them to fall asleep. But unfazed by his decreased forces, Ersa continued forward, ordering his soldiers not to stop for anything. Knowing that his system was already plugged into the city's surveillance system, Donika then expressed their need to get out of the city immediately. Moments later, somebody tried reaching out to her through the helmet, stating that it wasn't too late to join them. But when Rook asked her who it was, she told him she'd explain after they weren't dead. At that point, while returning fire to the bears, Rook conveyed that their best chance at survival was getting to his rocket, stating that they could leave right now. But right after doing so, Ersa shut down any hope of getting off this planet by blasting the rocket with the cannon attached to his vehicle. Everything Rook had worked so long and hard for was nothing more than a burning pile of wreckage now. Yet whatever he was feeling right now was completely insignificant because he couldn't just stand there and die, so him and Donika booted up their vehicles, getting out of there as fast as possible. As they made their escape, Donika apologized for what happened to his ship, stating that she could still help him get off Exodus if he still wanted to leave, but before doing so, he'd have to help her. Rook didn't need any convincing though, because if helping her meant killing the warden who killed his friend and destroyed his ticket off this planet, then he was in. Donika then explained that Ersa wasn't actually a warden. The only reason he had a helmet was due to the fact that he stole it, and the reason he was so huge was because he'd undergone genetic alteration just like his bears. After that, Rook asked what he wanted, and according to Donika, he wanted Exodus, which didn't make any sense to Rook because Exodus was dying. But based on what Donika believed, Exodus could still be saved, but only if they got to the other wardens before Ersa himself did. And with things coming to a close, Ersa then demanded his men to bring him Rook and Wolf's helmets with their heads still inside. But sadly, that's when the issue is brought to an end. But if you want to see what happens next, let me know in the comments down below.